So when I was your generation, interest rates were 18%. And I'm hearing people bitching about 6%, right? I had no money. I grew up with nothing. I had 4 different fathers. We didn't have food on Thanksgiving. The reason I provided 1 billion meals in 10 years, now I'm doing 62 billion meals I've done in 3 years. The reason I got driven to do this is because I was hungry, right? Because I didn't have that kind of being taken care of. My fathers didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Are some people born with that hunger? Because sometimes you just see it lacking in somebody. What causes that lack?
I'll tell you the history of the world in 4 sentences. Good times create weak people. You can study 1,000 years of Roman history. You can study 500 years of Anglo-American history. I highly recommend, if you guys really want a perspective to help your generation, you should read The Fourth Turning or the book Generations. 2 great books, Strauss and Howe. I was working with the President of the United States, Bill Clinton. In those days, I worked with him because I'm an independent. And then I went across the street and I worked with the head of the House, Gingrich, who was a Republican. And both men had this book on their desks. The president had it, and so did Gingrich, right? And Gingrich is a historian. So I read the book, and it was one of the most valuable books in my life because it put everything, it showed me that there are seasons to everything. And so I was waking up in a winter season. I was coming of age, 18, 19 years old, in a winter season, 18% interest rates. So I studied my ass off. I figured out, I made 100 offers on pieces of real estate. 99 said no. It was actually 103. 103rd one said yes. I bought this piece of real estate, try to make money on 18% on a piece of real estate. Good luck, right? But all I knew is real estate was the way that you could build wealth. I grew up from nothing, right? But what happened was then I had somebody, I hired, it was so far away, the place I bought, I hired a little local management company to manage the place. And they called me one day and said, well, a guy said that one of the stairs broke and he fell and he wants $100,000. Well, it's kind of inconvenient. I didn't have that. I could have just let that end me. But I was relentless. You know, I was like, okay, I'm going to learn. This is painful. I'm going to learn. But the season will eventually change. So think of it this way. There's the greatest breakthrough in humanity came from the understanding of patterns. Pattern recognition gives you power. Pattern utilization gives you real power, and pattern creation makes you a master of something. What do I mean? When you don't recognize patterns, you live in fear. You live in like, oh my God, the system's changed. I can't do it. I can't succeed. Because you don't understand that there's a pattern that's been around forever. It's just not in your lifetime that you've noticed it in your 15 years since college, right? Or 10 or whatever it's been for you, right? So as an example, when we figured out this thing called seasons, humanity went from hunter-gatherers who couldn't survive to we could stay in one place, but we made one distinction. There's only one season you could plant in, springtime. If you worked your tail off in the winter and planted, you didn't get the reward. So you had to plant in the spring, then you had to go through the hard times of the summer protected, then you got reward in the spring, then you better hang on to some for the next winter. When we figured that out, humanity grew. That distinction of patterns is the most important thing for your life. You have a pattern of where you are right now in your lives, both of you. If you're 0 to, say, 21 years old, you're in springtime. Tell me, is things hard to grow in spring or easy?
Easy.
Very easy, right? If you start a business in springtime, you think you're a genius. You're full of all it is you're in the right place at the right time. And when the season changes, that's what thins it out.
So if you were to sum up and provide some specific advice to someone out there, some real world application advice, someone that's a little bit younger, they're in that like up to 20 age, or they're in the next season feeling a little jaded, a little dejected, what is some real world application things that they can do to reverse the way that they feel about the world, to actually become someone that they are proud of being, someone that's productive and positive?
I would say 2 things. what Jim Rohn taught me, my original teacher, when I asked him about why my fathers were broke, right? He said, if you want to have success in your life, stop asking what you can get and worrying about what you're going to get and focus on what you're going to give. If you give more value than anybody else in the marketplace, you will dominate the marketplace. He asked me at one point, because I was saying, why do my dads, 4 of my fathers, they were suffering. They didn't have enough money for food. And he said, Tony, we're equal as souls, but we're not equal in the marketplace. So if you want to have a balance, economic balance for starters, you've got to actually invest in yourself to get the skills that will give you the advantage over someone else, instead of saying how the system's not supporting you, because that mindset or attitude is then self-fulfilling. Second, I'd say is you've got to become a student of history. We don't study history at all because, it's not the same, but it rhymes, as you've heard, right? There are patterns that are so clear. Those 3 skill sets I told you are the most important skill sets I want my grandkids to have, anybody have. Pattern recognition of anything. If you can recognize patterns, you can learn quickly and you will not be in fear, because it won't feel like it's random things happening to you. But you have to do your homework. You can't go online and just let somebody tell you who's pitching to you because they're afraid they're not doing well enough that the system's rigged against them. You got to look at the people that actually have succeeded and find out what's going on in their life, what they went through to get that pattern. And so that's what I did early on. I studied history. I studied everything I could on psychology, because that's basically what shapes all human beings. And then I shaped myself around business. And those 3 skills for me were the most important skills.
Are some people unfixable?
Well, yeah, if you have no desire to improve your life, you're not going to improve your life, of course. Now, the truth is, life will show up at some point and get you to make a demand. You'll have something that happens in your life. You'll have somebody in your family that gets ill. You'll have an economic thing will happen. You'll have a COVID and your business will be shut down. Life always is calling us to grow in some way. And so it doesn't matter who you are. If you don't do it proactively, it'll happen reactively. But what I'd also say to you really is, if you understand these 3 skills, pattern recognition, pattern utilization, that's where the power comes. You see somebody who's great in investing, they don't just recognize the patterns, they know how to use them, right? I'm not talking about betting the money on one thing and hoping. That's not investing, right? That's basically
Gambling.
betting. That's a betting process, right? If you really start to understand anything and you start to master the patterns, understand them, use them, and then eventually you'll create them, like playing someone's piano. You learn someone else's music first, right? Because they've already perfected it. That's what modeling is. But if you do it long enough and you're committed enough, all of a sudden you will come through. Now you're a pattern creator. If you look at somebody who's a GOAT in their industry, I don't care if it's sports or business or anything else, it's because they're a pattern creator. And so if you just model everybody else, you'll succeed. Right? Find the pattern that works and do it. But if you start doing that enough with enough different people, you're going to discover there's answers in you that don't exist anywhere else. You are a unique human being. You have something to bring to the table, but it takes time. Most entrepreneurs in the beginning of their career are operators. Operators do everything. They try to keep everything as tight as possible. They hire the best person they know themselves. And then they hire the next best person they can do. But the first person they know they hire, they also don't pay them enough usually, because it's their business to make it go. And you get stuck in a certain plateau unless you get to a point. Like, the reason I have all these businesses, how could I possibly run 114 businesses, have 5 kids, 5 grandkids, travel the world, do my speaking, do all the things I do, have a life, if I was an operator? I'm an owner. So I've learned how to be an owner. An owner is somebody I've learned how to build teams that can do those things. But to do that, I had to go through the process that most young entrepreneurs don't do, which is, you can do it better than somebody else, you do it yourself. And so as long as you do that, then no one else can make the mistakes. They can't learn, they can't grow, and you're tied to the business. So your business is really a paid job, a very paid job, maybe a highly well paid job, but it's a job still. It's not a business till you can walk away for a month or two and do nothing and have it keep growing. So you have to decide if you want a job or if you want a business. And there's nothing wrong with having as a independent, someone who's owns their own business, that's what they call it. But usually what that person is, they're self-employed, to be a more accurate description. If you own a business, then you have a system that works without you.
What's been your best financial investment?
I think probably I bought a power plant in West Virginia because I saw what was happening with AI coming and the need for data centers. And it was a coal power plant that they were shutting down, and I saved all the jobs, and that investment's returns ridiculous.
How did you find that?
Because I'm always studying the trends, right? Again, you're not going to do anything unless you become a student. You got to become a student of personal development, because if you don't grow, it's like, I remember you asked me the question, my best investment.
Yeah.
I asked that to Warren Buffett. And Warren said, Tony, it's what you do. I said, what are you talking about? He said he invested in Dale Carnegie. Because I invested in Dale Carnegie. He said, most important investment I've ever made in my life. He said, because otherwise my ideas would have dropped out. But I learned how to communicate my ideas. Otherwise you wouldn't know who I am. He goes, and he said, the most important investment you can ever make is in yourself. He actually did a big tirade on this 2 years ago. It was on one of his talks. And he said, look, here's the best part about this investment. No one can tax it, right? Your skills keep growing and no one can take any piece of that. If dollar goes crazy, it goes to nothing, and we got shekels, you'll get the most shekels if you're the most skilled lawyer, the most skilled investor, the most skilled whatever the case may be. He said the investment in yourself is always the first and most important investment. I believe that's true. So there's these patterns in the mind that are really critical to understand, because they help you understand how people are wired differently. And instead of being frustrated with them, especially if you have kids, that's when it'll really be interesting for you. It'll help you go, oh no, they're wired differently in this area. And then you can find different advantages. Like in Chinese medicine, they have different archetypes that they use. Some people are water, some people are fire. They have different qualities. And some of them you not relate to. But when you understand these 5 archetypes, you're able to go, oh, well, that's the water in my life. I get it. I'm not like that, but you begin to build an appreciation.